Hello, everybody. How are you guys? We're continuing our city spotlight on Des Moines, Iowa. Now, if you're from outside the United States, Des Moines is in the middle of the state of Iowa, and Iowa is in the middle of the United States. So you can't get more middler than the middle. And the original, this video is going to talk about the origins of Des Moines, the very early days. And a lot of people wonder about the name Des Moines. Now, it means of the monks or the monks. And that's because there was a monastery built there in the very early days, like around the mid 1800s. Okay, this state was established as 1851, but the monks rolled into town earlier than that, the early 1840s, and they built a monastery called the Des Moines Monastery, or some say the Monasterio del Cielo del Des Moines, the monastery of the sky of Des Moines, which reflects their love of golf, because the monastery was also the clubhouse for a golf course they built in the early 1840s. And of course, there's only a limited golf season in Des Moines because the winters are fairly harsh. And so the meaning of the Ministerio del Cielo, the Ministry of the Sky, is an homage to God that he gives the community, the area, a certain number of golf days per year. And so that monastery is still there. If you go to downtown Des Moines, you'll see the monastery still there. Now, the golf course itself is not, but if you go to Waveland Golf Course, inside the clubhouse, they have pictures of the original golf course from a sky view. And that's because they were able to shoot some monks in the air in a catapult, and they were able to draw very quickly a design, an overview of the golf course, the original course that is now displayed at the Waveland Golf Course on the walls of the pro shop of the clubhouse there, inside the grill where you could get a sandwich. Now, there's one historian that claims that the word Des Moines comes from an Algonquin Indian name, that means loon, which is a bird. But it also could relate to modern day Des Moiners, or Des Moinians. Some people say Des Moinians, and some say Des Moinesinistas. So it just depends on whichever one you want to use. But some of them are pretty loony. They're just, in a good way, right? They like to have fun, and they're a little bit, loony. And that's reflected in the way that they greet each other. Because in Des Moines, because it has this monk's background, right? And this sort of almost like a early religious background, a lot of times they'll do a little bit of this kind of action. It's not quite a Japanese bow, but it's more like that kind of action as you walk down the street. So if you're in Des Moines, you might want to just give that a try. You don't have to you can just, if you're an experienced Des Moiner, sometimes you just give it a little, it's kind of like when you say, how are you doing? And over time, you shorten it to how you doing, or how y'all. So that's that shortened version of that sort of religious, but it's not really connotated to a religious, but it derived from that background in the early days of Des Moines. So give that. Now, if they don't greet you back that way, don't take it personally, because not everybody does it, right? Some people don't do it. So let's just leave it at that. Now, there is sometimes, if you read the official history books of Des Moines, they'll refer to the Des Moines Rapids. They'll refer to the Des Moines Rapids. Now, that is the rapids in the Des Moines River, just as it cuts through downtown. Now, it has standing waves. Now, standing waves are when the rapids are so deep. You'll see this in the Colorado River. You'll see it in the New River in the East Coast, or West Virginia area, I guess. And that is when the rapids are so deep, and it creates a hole. Like as the water comes down over a rock, it'll create a hole, moving the sediment below the water, and that creates a standing wave on the other side. And if you've ever gone whitewater rafting, guys, that means you are going to get launched. And the standing waves of the Des Moines Rapids are so high, people have been launched onto the courthouse. The Des Moines, so they're in the raft and they go flying on these standing waves, they're called, into the air onto the courthouse, which makes it easy for the cops to arrest them for reckless whitewater rafting. And a lot of times they just spend the night in jail right there wearing their wet clothes because they've been whitewater rafting all day. So be careful if you go down, get an experienced guide. And so you know they're experienced if their name is Clyde, Zeus, or Sparky. And if they put out their cigarette in the back of their hand without wincing, that's an experienced whitewater rafting guide. So that's just from personal experience, something that you might want to consider. Now, if you look at the word Moin, now in the French, like we said, it said monks, but it can also mean, the French have, they like to use the same word for a lot of different things. So if you look at the word Moin, it could also, it refers to the howl of a wolf. So it's kind of because they're moaning in a way, like, howl, so moan, I don't know. It connects to the French in some backwards way. Who knows what the French are doing, to be honest with you. But so in the early days when the monks were playing golf, if a monk shot a hole in one, the surrounding, because you got to remember, it was just prairie, but there were still trees in those days. This is before all the trees were knocked down to create farmland, right? So the wolves in the surrounding thickets would howl in celebration of a monk hitting a hole in one. And this was significant not only because it's hard to do for anybody, even today, but because they're wearing those monk robes. Have you ever tried to swing a golf club with those monk robes? I mean, I had in a very unfortunate Halloween choice one year as a monk. Carrying my golf bag and carrying my clubs. I don't know what I was thinking there, guys. But so sometimes the word Moin. So in other words, you could say Des Moines means the howl or the howlers, and this also relates to modern day Des Moines because sometimes they stay out a little late, especially around Drake University. They have a few cocktails at those college bars around there. And this also then relates to ex-Des Moiners or current Des Moiners, perhaps, that go to other colleges, for example, the University of Iowa in Iowa City or Iowa State University in Ames, Iowa, that also have plenty of bars. And so it basically refers to anybody from Des Moines that's out late night and having a couple too many adult refreshments, and they start howling at the moon. And this makes it easy for the police to pick them up, guys, because how many people howl as a regular routine after having a few too many adult beverages? And a lot of times the police would just park and they'll lower the windows. Could be the window, they don't care. They lowered the windows, and about 1 a.m. you start hearing the howling, and they just drive around and pick them up. It's like finding shiny nickels on the sidewalk. They're everywhere. So that is a different connection. We don't hear this connection so much anymore because, first of all, historians aren't completely sure of that translation, using that French translation for the word Moin or howl or the howlers, or see what I mean? So they tend to stick with the original idea of the monks. Now, the monks themselves also would have some cocktails, but it was the house wine that they were making. So they made a little for the mass, for the settlers, for the prospectors, for the people that originally showed up in Des Moines, people going west, the original farmers, the groundbreakers. So they had a little community there. The city was building in the early days, right? And the monks would make the wine. And of course, like any good monk, you make a little for yourself, right? As soon as mass is over, a little refreshment, that's allowed. Okay, that's part of the deal. That's part of the job. Now, sometimes a couple of the monks, they're having it for breakfast and lunch. I mean, come on, back off, brother, back off. Slow down. But nonetheless, so that really is sort of the early days. And of course, now it's this thriving city. It's this thriving city, if I could speak. And we're going to find out what happened after those early days in future videos. and then we're going to bring it to the current day and bring you up to date on all that is happening in Des Moines. We'll see you then.